Normally, when I refer to Florida and the environment, it's usually not great, especially since the governor has taken everything regarding climate change out of their policies. But today we have some sort of good news in that Florida has been one of the states that have been added to the list to ban the release of balloons at parties or any types of celebrations, or just release the balloons in any kind of way. But there are some stipulations with that, which we're going to talk about on today's episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. Let's start the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to another exciting episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin. This is the podcast where you find out what's happening with the ocean, how you can speak up for the ocean, what you can do to live for a better ocean by taking action. And on today's episode, we're going to be talking about balloon releases and how in Florida they've actually decided to ban the intentional release of balloons. It comes with some caveats, which we're going to talk about today, but I'm just going to let you know, this is going to be a bit of a quick episode. I'm doing a little batch recording because it's Canada Day this weekend. It's the Canada Day weekend. It's the first official long weekend of the summer, and every year I go up with my family to a cottage of good friends of the families, and we just go and relax, and we enjoy sort of the end of the school year for my kids and sort of a new beginning of the summer. And the dogs go up, they have a great time by the lake, and we get our blue mind on. Shout out to Dr. Wallace J. Nichols. May he rest in water. We're going to be getting our blue mind on this weekend and enjoying some drinks, enjoying some relaxation. But I'm trying to set you up so that you do not miss any episodes of, this podcast, of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I also wanted to let you know that if you wanted to make sure you don't miss anything that goes on in ocean conservation news, or even if you're trying to build a career in ocean conservation, I built a newsletter, and I've been advertising for a little bit at the end of our episodes, but I'm going to start doing it at the beginning of our episodes. If you want to sign up for our newsletter, to get to your inbox ocean conservation news and updates on our podcast, as well as other podcasts that we have in our little network here, you can go to speakupforblue.com/newsletter. That's speakupforblue.com/newsletter for all the fun things that's happening right now and that's going to be happening in the future. I'll keep you updated. But let's get back into the episode. This is a really interesting call for Florida. Now, Florida has a House bill called House Bill 321. It's dubbed the Release of Balloons Bill, and it seeks to ban any intentional releases of balloons in the state. So that means if you're on a birthday celebration or you're doing a gender reveal and you have these balloons, you pop them or you just release them to celebrate something or the launch of something, whatever that might be. Some people do it during their wedding, whatever that might be. What happens is those balloons go up in the air and they fall over. They eventually come down. They get popped by the atmosphere or whatever that's made up there, maybe a bird or something like that. They land eventually somewhere in the environment, whether it be on a sidewalk, whether it be in the middle of a road, whether it be in the Everglades in Florida, or whether it be in the ocean. It could be anywhere, right? You don't know where it's going to land or how it's going to land. What's happened is we found that these balloons are getting into the stomachs of animals because they fall in an area where there are animals, which if you think about birds is pretty much anywhere. They ingest them into their stomach. So we find these animals dead. We find pieces of balloon that have gone into their system. So that obviously is not something that we want. It's not something good. And we need to ensure that this doesn't happen. So some of these states in the U.S. and other places around the world, although I'm not sure who, but this is one focused. This article is focused on the ones in the U.S. have already banned it. So I'm going to read off the list. So California banned it, Connecticut, Delaware, Hawaii, Maine, Maryland, Rhode Island, Tennessee, and Virginia are also on the list of states that have passed or put forward legislation to ban or limit balloon releases outdoors. Now you're probably wondering, Andrew, like how do you limit that release? Everybody, this is something that I struggle with too. When my kids were young, we would have balloons because kids love balloons. I loved balloons when I was a kid. All kids love balloons of some sort. They may not love the popping right away, but they love the colors. They love how big it is. You play keep ups with the balloons. It's a lot of fun. But let's be honest here, it's not good for the environment. They don't break down. They are plastic. They are some sort of rubbery plastic that doesn't break down in the environment. They can get into the stomachs and digestive systems of animals, wreaking havoc in their system and wreaking havoc on populations. And so, look, this is a great way forward for Florida in some sort of manner for the environment. So it says Florida's current law allows for 9 or fewer balloons to be released within a 24-hour period by, I guess, one person, which is really weird. Diving into this really made me think about like what pieces of legislation go through. However, this latest bill classifies the intentional release of all balloons inflated with a gas lighter than air is as littering. So you can fill it with air and let it go, and it's not considered littering. But if it's a gas like helium or anything like that, then it's considered littering. Now, Oceana, a nonprofit conservation organization, lobbied for the bill and stated that the legislation's passage as a great day for Florida's coastlines and ocean wildlife. It's a great day in that respect. I see, highlighting the great part of this bill and banning this, but it's just Florida's new law will help save ocean animals from these preventable deaths. While releasing balloons is sometimes used for celebrations, Floridians can opt for greener choices like bubbles, kites, planting trees, or making memorial gardens. So there are alternatives, right? So I think that's what really good. So what this bill does, you're like, how does it really regulate? What's the punishment? It revises the penalties for intentionally releasing balloons by specifying that a person commits littering if they are intentionally organize the release of, or intentionally cause to be released balloons inflated with a gas that is lighter than air. So the gas has to be lighter than air. So that means it'll actually float. Sorry. So it's not just by air. It's by gas lighter than air. Weather research or hot air balloons that are recovered after flight would still be allowed. And so this will take effect July 1st, Canada Day, which is great. Canada Day is a nice little birthday present for Canada, but also it's only in Florida. A lot of Canadians in Florida, though. Are there exemptions for biodegradable balloons? So that is also natural. It's made of natural latex, according to EcoFreak. And however, the bill will remove the previous exemption for balloons that have been determined by the FWC rules to be biodegradable or photodegradable. So there are some different caveats within that. So the legal consequences is that, get this, you could be subject up to a $150 fine. Of that amount, $50 would go to the Florida Public Environmental Protection Solid Waste Management Trust Fund. For balloons over 15 pounds, fines can reach up to $1,000. These penalties will not apply to children under 6, according to the bill. So, essentially, if it's a birthday party and the children release it, they're allowed. If parents release it, they're not allowed. And that is really what's the gist of it. It's one of those laws where you're like, great, this is happening. It does affect the environment. It's more plastic in the environment, so we're trying to prevent plastic from getting in the environment. This is one way of doing it. However, when was the last time the majority of people who release balloons are adults? A lot of the times, you'll see a child, usually under 6, with a string that's attached to a balloon, and they're wandering around, and sometimes it's attached to their wrist because some parents are like, hey, let's make sure that this balloon doesn't go in the air. But eventually what's going to happen is going to get into the air. You see the faces of your child or the child that was holding the balloon just sort of go into shock, and then usually it's some sort of crying and emotion. And so like that is something where you're like, oh, that's too bad. Like that's something that we don't want to see. That's something that could be preventable if we didn't release balloons anyway. But it's something that happens quite often. But unfortunately, it's more with little kids. So obviously you're not going to prosecute a little kid, but you can prosecute the parents, right? You can find the parents. They're the ones who have control over the child. And although a lot of times it's accident, you have to tell the child, that, hey, like parent, like you have to tell the child, we don't want this to go into the environment, because remember those sea turtles that you like so much? Well, they can eat those if they land, and they can choke on it and they can die. We don't want that to happen. We don't want to hurt the sea turtles, right? Children will be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Let's do that. Like, I think what happens is people just don't think about it often enough. And one way to do that, if you're in Florida and you don't really know the effects of balloons, or you want to find out who it harms or what it does, go to the Loggerhead Marine Life Sea Turtle Center. The Sea Turtle Loggerhead Marine Life Center, I think it's called. That's in Jupiter, Florida. Free. It's a great place to learn about sea turtles, and you can ask about the effect of balloons and what they think about this this new policy and this new law and the fines that do it. I don't think it's enough. I think it needs to be a little bit more. But obviously, it is a balloon release, and people do it by accident. If they do it on purpose, yes, absolutely fine the heck out of them. I would love to see these balloons not go in the air, but unfortunately they do. And it's just something that's culturally in North America, that's a cultural thing where it's like, yes, we have balloons and we will do balloons. I had trouble trying to get it out of my own household because it's like, hey, these are our kids. The kids should have time with balloons. And it's a difficult sell to do that because you don't want to disappoint your kids, but also you don't want to ruin the environment. So I'm glad that there's a law in it. I'm surprised it's in Florida, to be honest, especially with the way it treats its environment, its water quality, climate change, hurricanes, all that kind of stuff. But I'm glad that it's there. And that's really the gist of it. I'm glad that it's there. I'm glad that they're not the only state that's doing this. There's multiple states. I'll read them again. California, Connecticut, Delaware, Hawaii, Maine, Maryland, Rhode Island, Tennessee, Virginia, and now Florida is added to that list. So that's it. That's a quick version of the news today. I'd love to hear what you think. Do you think it's just like, is this a policy that's really necessary? Is this a policy that the governor is just doing to try to appease environmentalists? Or is it something that you think it was really needed to do? I'd love to hear what you think of just sort of the overall, not just the political landscape in Florida, because obviously there's a lot going on in Florida from a political standpoint that one I don't agree with, but people from the audience, I don't judge on how you do it. But when it comes to environment, I'm just like, I'm judging how this government is really reacting in Florida. But they do this. Is this their way of trying to turn the tide or trying to appease some environmentalists? And is it enough? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Go hit me up on Instagram, DM me at How to Protect the Ocean. And that's about it. If you want to, let people know about this, you can share the episode. Love to hear their thoughts. But that's it for today's episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin. Have a great day. We'll talk to you next time, and happy conservation.